Let's warmly welcome architect Gaurav Pathak, co-founder of Design21, a leading luxury architectural firm in India. He has worked with Indian, Dutch, and American award-winning design firms on large and small-scale residential and commercial projects. He has worked with renowned architects in India along with international projects in Holland. His 6 years of international experience in the USA and a master's degree in interior architecture from SCAD, Georgia, USA, have gained a global perspective of space, spatial quality, building materials, and eye for details, help create unique design solution on site. Gaurav will be presenting a submission on building materials for Monsoon. So let's welcome Gaurav.
So we're going to be talking about the material choices and construction techniques. It's not very descriptive, it's just going to be touching the surface of the issue at hand here. So I think one of the most important aspects of protecting your building from water damage is careful consideration of design, choice of materials, and construction process. Often people ignore the construction process, but with our experience and understanding, I think construction process is probably the most important aspect which ensures that the building is weatherproof and leak proof, both from inside and outside. Protection of water is required from multiple sources. There is foundation and basements, there is walls and windows. Finishes play an important role because nowadays a lot of finishes are being explored, whether it's a paint surface, stone cladding, metal application, and more often than not, it is these junctions, these joineries, these mixing of materials which can cause, in openings through which the water can penetrate inside the building. A roof is absolutely probably one of the biggest areas where water can come, because that is the biggest exposure, one of the biggest exposures of a building to natural elements. Landscaping, nowadays a lot of elements in landscape, whether it's a water feature, it's plants, vertical and both horizontal are being used. So that is another reason why one has to be careful that proper waterproofing and protection is done so that water doesn't come from there. And last but not the least is the maintenance. So we're going to be talking about waterproofing of the foundation, and I think it's important to understand the construction stage as well as the maintenance bit, especially during monsoon. So all these aspects we're going to be touching briefly about the construction and how one can prepare themselves during heavy wet durations during the year. So for the foundations, I think it's important that one should ensure while the foundations are being made that proper drainage systems are provided, and one should not allow standing water during the foundation process, because it can really damage the surface on which the concrete and the metal is being installed. So it's important that the proper drainage and runoff is very effective. And obviously, once the foundations and the your basement walls are done, proper waterproofings are done so that water does not penetrate through the wet sides inside the building. One can ensure that proper inspections are done and look out for cracks and gaps so that water doesn't penetrate. And once these are inspected, proper seals should be provided so that the damages can be mitigated. One should also ensure that no standing water around the building, because if there is water, then it will find its way inside the building. So one can ensure that if there are no wet areas, long-standing wet areas inside the building or even on the rooftops. Walls and windows, again, during the construction, the choice of material and proper treatment of joints is absolutely essential. Quality of windows, whether it's wood or it's metal or it's aluminum, one has to ensure that these are good quality products, because a lot of options are available in the market and people get disoriented, especially with so many options available. And once these installations are done, openings should have sufficient overhangs and awnings as and when required, as the design demands. So one has to make sure that your design has to go in hand with proper protection of these openings. Again, to prepare oneself for the monsoons, inspection again is probably one of the most important things, and one has to ensure that cracks and gaps are properly sealed, so as one does not allow water to penetrate. And once these joints are sealed, one has to ensure that it stays like that. Uh, Next is the finishes. Finishes again has to be done so that it withstands harsh weather changes. Most of the times, the temperature difference when it becomes too hot and it goes to extreme cold during nights, the expansion and contraction of the material in the building skin, that is the reason why gaps are formed and openings are created. So one has to ensure that the material is absolutely elastic. It allows, the material should be allowed to expand and contract so that the openings are temporary and they can again shrink and expand as per the requirement of the building. uh, in terms of preparing for monsoons, once again it's about the inspection and covering those seals and joints immediately. Roof, one has to ensure that proper slopes are provided, and joints, especially around the water outlets, should be properly covered and protected for short term and long term both. And once the monsoons are there, one has to check for damages and make sure all your outlets where water is leaving the building are clean, crack free, and without any obstruction. Landscaping again is one of the important features these days because a lot of these residential applications have aspirations to have these, beautiful landscaped areas, whether it's on the roof, whether it's in their basements, whether it's in their front or rear backyards. So one has to make sure that proper water protection is done for these surfaces. Again, when you're doing vertical surfaces like vertical gardens, the way your uh, landscape elements are anchored to these surfaces, they're again your weak points inside the building, and water typically penetrates through that. Uh, One another aspect is landscaping brings these shrubs and trees very close to the building, and more often than not, these over a period of time, the roots also cause a lot of damage to the building. So one has to ensure that proper inspection and maintenance is done. On the roofs, there are weeds which often lead to damaging the joints between vertical and the horizontal surfaces. That is also has to be taken care of. Um, Maintenance, I would say, one has to make sure that you have professionals involved during the construction, after the construction. A lot of these days, AMCs are being provided not only for not only to take care of the construction process, but once the project is handed over to the client, the ownership, once is passed on to the owners, uh, they obviously have to rely on consultants and specialists to make sure the building is it can sustain and be damage free for a longer time. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. That was such an engaging submission on building materials for monsoon.